Hello and welcome to this Wired virtual briefing. I'm Amit Katwala. I'm a writer and editor at Wired, and today we're going to be discussing how generative AI will reinvent HR. I think it's fair to say that HR and AI have had a bit of an uneasy relationship until now. People teams have been keen to explore AI's obvious benefits, but there have also been high-profile examples of it going wrong. In a field where making good decisions is not only an ethical but also a legal requirement, this has caused some people to be deeply cautious of this technology. But as you probably know, we are in the midst of an AI revolution, and fast and easy access to Gen AI has the potential to open up powerful new possibilities for HR professionals. So today we're going to be exploring the impact that AI is already having on HR, how it stands to change in the future, and crucially, how some of the risks can be mitigated. So to discuss, I'm delighted to be joined by Aaron Goldsmid, Head of Product at Deel, the all-in-one HR platform for global teams. Aaron looks after the company's data and AI, its connectivity, and its fintech suite of products. He has more than 20 years of product and engineering leadership from roles at Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and Twitter, to name but a few. And I'm sure he's going to have lots of fascinating insights to share with us today. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you, Amit.
Great. Well, let's dive straight into it, shall we? So can you tell me a bit about how you've seen Gen AI being used in HR already? Give us a sense of the kind of breadth of use cases here.
Sure. I think I kind of separate into sort of three kind of main buckets. The first is things that have been done for the last 5 to 10 years that we're now calling AI, which is this is the OCR of resumes or scanning of receipts for expenses or anomaly detection for payroll discrepancies, stuff like this. This has been a long-standing practice. It's still good. It's still important, and we're making those same investments. I would say there's that second one, which is a little bit of the I would say more difficult ethically and sort of regulatory version of that, which is where an AI is making decisions, being it resume screening, be it anything else, where the AI itself is actually making the decision. This is something that I think we find really quite high risk and problematic, and we actually published an entire manifesto about kind of our principles around this, about AI and HR, and this is one of the things. It's like the human always needs to be in the middle. The human makes the decision. And then I would say this third category, of which I think GitHub got it right when they call it the co-pilot. These are tools that assist your HR professional, your payroll professional, even your just people manager or your employee to make the distance between information they need or workload that they have to do smaller, right? If you think about how a co-pilot in a plane works, yes, their job is to, if the pilot has a heart attack, to fly the plane, but most of it's to manage workload. So the pilot themselves can be doing a high leverage, high value stuff. And so things like, we have a product, that I used recently with one of my directs let me know the great news that they were about to have a child, and they're in the Netherlands. Figuring out what paternity leave in the Netherlands was not something, as someone who lives in San Francisco, I had immediately on my thing. Normally, I would have had to go to an HR person, my HR BP. They would have had to go to local, or they would have had to go to outside resources. And that decision would have been, quite a bit away. But we have a version of that based off of our, 100+ compliance experts on our own internal knowledge base, which we think is defensively one of the best on this global employment work stuff. And I was able to ask it, and it just gave me very specifically in sub-second things. What did this do? It meant I wasn't sort of saying, hey, let me get that back to you about this. I was like, okay, well, here are the things. Now let's talk about how exciting this is for you, how we can support you and your family through this exciting new thing, how we can make sure that there's a transition. So we were having the really high leverage generative conversation. And so that's that third thing, which is like, how do we bring HR professionals, payroll professionals, hiring managers, and employees who are asked to do more and more and more on any given day with less, how to give them back leverage in time.
Absolutely. So it's not just about sort of saving money, making things more efficient, but it's also about providing a better quality of service at the end of the day.
I actually think that's where you get your ROI. Yes, you can do more with less, but I actually think what it is that you can take the detritus, the toil, the sort of low level. I mean, all of this, how much of our day is occupied by, kind of just the toil of work, right? Like if you can automate most of that, and what we do is like AI is like quite good at a lot of that, not necessarily finally making the decisions, but getting you all the information so that you are then empowered to make the decision in a way that's super high trustworthy, it means you're able to do the work that you're really good at, which is the benefit to everyone.
Absolutely. So where do you see this going in the future? What are some of the emerging applications that you think might become interesting in, say, a year or 5 years or 10 years?
Sure. So I think the first is it will democratize the playing field in quite substantial ways. So, I was at a dinner with a bunch of YC founders, and they were talking about wanting to hire, a college colleague who was in France, but they're in the Bay Area. And they're just like, too hard, right? You listen to some of the big tech companies I was at. That would have been, we wouldn't have flinched at that. We would have had the infrastructure. We would have had this all in place. And so, with things like what we're doing at Deel and sort of being able to sort of understand misclassification in all these different markets and all of the rules and all of this and all of sort of the, parental leave, it means that a small emerging company has the same resources and the same sort of is on the same level as a global behemoth, right? Like it used to be, if you rewind the clock 20 years ago, the ability to buy data centers was a competitive advantage. With AWS, Azure, like GCP, that stopped being a competitive advantage. So it really leveled the playing field, right? So we see that again on a war for talent. I live in a place where it is some of the most expensive markets in the world, right? Being able to access a global path of talent, right? We recently launched something that said when we released some data that when there was sort of the economic downturn in the Valley, we saw a ton of global hiring in for Bay Area talent. So it democratizes that. And for the large organizations, it's around speed and agility. Right? Like I'm an exec. I have a question, I get an answer. But it may take me days or weeks to get that answer. People go do this. But being able to ask natural language queries of my own organization, my own data, is around the corner. In fact, we have it now on Deel. You can sort of say like, hey, look, how many people am I offboarding this month? How many, what's the average tenure of my sales team in Spain? And it just gives me that data. And this is stuff that, is beyond what the generic LLM can do. This is the value add to that. Where do I see this going out further out? It's, think about the types of analysis that can be done that's more complex, right? Like stringing along these things. So like, imagine I wanted to, I had, $5 million and I wanted to go hire some engineers. Being able to look at across all of these different markets, what is the most sort of like quality to cost different things? How does that tie into where my other organization is? Where is there a hotter talent market where we're seeing salaries increase versus something that may be untapped? Proximity in locations to great universities and a really interesting talent pipeline. And within I have $5 million, I need to hire some engineers. What should I go do? Having basically a fully vetted kind of, here's like scenario A, scenario B, scenario C that takes into all these considerations. That is work that we would do now, but it would take us weeks, if not months. Some companies would take years to be able to do to be sub-second. And what that means is that the pace of decision-making, the ability to respond goes way faster. I also think that it's going to have in the experience of an employee, it's really going to improve their journey, right? So being able to, we're working on some stuff with our recent Savvy acquisition that is being able to do, okay, based on the career ladder for this role, where this person is, what we're seeing in reviews, help to create personalized journeys for professional development. Right. And, we live in an industry where a lot of our managers are very early in their career, frontline managers. So being able to give sort of really more structured thing to be able to grow careers and support that, not to replace the manager, but to really give a scaffolding for that conversation is going to change. I also think in terms of finding talent, like being able to say, hey, look, here are the criteria of folks that have really thrived in this organization. And rather than doing generic resume screening off of keywords, say like, these are the resumes that sort of show powerful signal there. I mean, with that, you introduce a bunch of sort of ethical questions, but I think it's I think there's a really clear path again because the person is always in the middle of that decision.
Yeah, so it's going to be useful not just for companies, but you think also for employees and maybe for job applicants as well?
I think it's gonna make the world feel a lot smaller and a lot faster, which is only good. And there's an enormous amount of talent around the planet that may not have access because they just don't live in a certain zip code. And being able to sort of democratize that, I think, is going to be really powerful.
That's great. So we've talked about some of the benefits. What are some of the risks? I think when we talk about AI and HR, people, often think of what could go wrong. So I'll just put the question to you like that. What could go wrong?
I mean, you also have to think about kind of what an LLM is. It's like, what is the most likely next word after the word that I just printed?
Mm.
Which, when you put it through that context, it can come up with some really compelling answers, but they're often not right. Hallucinating is a real problem. And so, one of the things, and I think we'll talk about that. I think there's another bit around just the ethics. Equal representation, making sure that there is no bias in the system, stuff like that. Which is really hard because it's informed by the training set, which is not something that we're doing even locally. And it takes 10 to the 12 number of articles to train a set. So you're talking about all of the internet, which means there's bias that we don't fully understand. On the first, I think if we were to say, oh, here's a legal or compliance question, go Google it and go do whatever that said, I think no one would say that's a good idea. Like everyone would, that would give any reasonable human pause. Like, hey, we have this interesting tax problem. Why don't you go Google it and we'll go do whatever Google says? That's essentially what an LLM does. And yes, it gives it in a much more compelling format, and it sounds really authoritative, but it's not. And this is what you're seeing. So again, no one's training outside of the biggest AI companies their own model. In fact, even tuning them is really sort of like you have to use, to tune an AI model, you're talking about all of medical journals for the last 60 years. No one has that data. That much data doesn't exist in the HR space. But what we've done is we've sort of what's called prompt engineering. There's a lot of other words for it right now. But really what it is around saying we have spent an immense amount of effort building a knowledge base of global compliance, work, employment, tax, payroll data, and vetted by professionals. And really what that is around saying that, and this is the source that LLM pulls from to be able to give you answers. And so that work, it's not sexy, but it's really, really powerful, right? It's the infrastructure behind these that makes it lower risk. And so in that case, when you would sort of do it in our platform with Deel AI, what you would see is that query question, it gives you exactly the answers, and it looks, I mean, you'll look at it, you're like, this, I now know more than I ever thought I would ever know about this question. But it also gives you the source material. And what's actually been really fun for us is that, it's this sort of, thumbs up, thumbs down thing. But when we get a bad result or a result that doesn't either where someone flags it as potential concern of a risk and that source material doesn't map, we actually have a content team that is a 24-hour SLA to update, write new content, vet it, which has been great because it finds out where all our gaps have been. And so over the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of queries we've done so far, it's really there. So it's, to answer the question, it's like the LLM, the generative AI is not, it's a new user interface. It's like mobile, right? It's not necessarily, it gives you a very compelling experience, but it doesn't give you a good answer. It's the underlying source material that matters. And it's not sexy, but it's really, really important. And then on I say the ethics side, right? No, we do not understand the biases of these systems. And they are built in such a ways that it's almost impossible to understand the bias of these systems. So where we have drawn a very strong line and really advise other folks is that the human always makes the decision. Think of this as, generative AI is your smartest intern you've ever got. Like you ask them a question, they come back with this fantastic presentation. It's perfectly well organized. It's really well researched, but they're still an intern. They can get it wrong. And so you need to, you would never let an intern make these types of decisions. Why would you let an AI? And the last one, which is a little bit around sort of like, I added one, so thanks for being patient. Is there's a lot of frothiness in the products that are being released today that are AI products. Many, many cases, and we're all excited about this. We're all trying to race to get to market. We're all trying to move fast. Is that they're just wrappers for ChatGPT or Gemini or pick your flavor. And so they're not really anything specific to the product. They're just, saving you a click. But the problem is that it's really hard to tell when one of those is actually built. Like we have built an immense amount of infrastructure to do that, to make it safe, to make it secure, to make it trustworthy, or just a wrapper. And so, as you're evaluating these as a customer, or even sort of, as a product person trying to build these things yourself, be like, is there real differentiation? Is there real sort of substance to this? Or is it just saving me that click? And then by that, can I trust it for whatever I'm trying to do?
Yeah, it seems to me that you sort of still have to do the work, right? Like, I think that when things like ChatGPT come out, a lot of companies seize upon them because they think, great, that solves our customer service problem. And then you have a situation where ChatGPT is giving, Chevys away for free because, you can trick it into giving you a car for $0 if you use the right prompts, because it doesn't understand what it's doing. It's just, as you said, putting words together in a certain order. And we've seen a lot of high profile cases of companies using these kind of Gen AI powered chatbots and having to pull them down. Apart from just doing the work to make sure that the AI knows stuff and knows that, or that the things that it knows or thinks it knows are accurate, what other steps can companies take to kind of mitigate some of the risks, things like hallucinations and errors when using AI for like HR purposes?
So I think when I advise other companies, I think it's a really helpful framing that we should think of Gen AI in many cases as a new user experience, right? It used to be we would sit at dinner before we all had mobile phones, and we would debate who was in a movie. And it could last us 40 minutes. Oh, is this person? No, is this movie? You can, I'm dating myself. But now everyone pulls out a phone, they have an answer. And so if we think about what generative AI does in a lot of ways, it like saves me about 45 minutes of Google searching and then putting all that information together. That doesn't necessarily give me a like definitive answer. So it organizes the data for me, it synthesizes it, but it still requires me as a human to be the right answer, right? And so, when we were launching our own products, we spent months and hundreds of thousands of queries having it be, our frontline support, our experts sort of in the middle to make sure that that was there. And only when were we confident, the hallucinations were really down to a unmeasurable minimum, did we expose it directly. And even then, we were insistent around publishing the source material so that if something doesn't sound right, you're no more than one click away from something that was reviewed by a lawyer or an HR professional or a payroll professional. And so when you put those together, but yeah, no, I mean, I think the real risk is that, you think of them as a UI, you don't necessarily think of them as it gets you the answer. It just makes the distance between you and the answer a lot shorter.
Yeah. I wanted to just come back to the subject of bias quickly. One thing that we see a lot in the medical profession is obviously these AI systems that are being used to analyze, things like cancer scans are not 100% accurate. However, they are often or have often been shown to be more accurate than humans looking at the same scans. And I suppose in HR in particular, where there's been lots of cases documented over the years that there is a degree of bias in human selections, human analyzing CVs or job interviews, would it be better to bring AI in, which at least can be a bit less biased, even if the training model that it was used, the training data that was used to train it maybe was biased? But if we can kind of make sure that the training data isn't biased, would AI actually be better at making decisions than humans?
So I am sure someone reviewing this video 20 years from now is going to be able to prove me wrong. I don't see it as better. What I see it as two different types of bias, which actually is a very good outcome, right? Because there's a set of things that a human would get wrong and a human would miss, and they get tired and they blinked or they're thinking about something in their life. And then there's a set of things that a computer will get wrong. And they're different things. So that when you combine the two, it actually reduces the risk altogether, right? Or not altogether, but it really, really fundamentally does a shift on the axis of bias, right? Because they're not biased you know, you and I work at the same company. We, share all the same things. We do this. We both looked at the same, same resume, right? There's too many studies of knee blind things where you take the name off and then all of a sudden you see bias, right? Gender, race, ethnicity, locality. We would have similar bias or similar classes of bias. The computer's going to have a totally different problem.
That's interesting.
And so you put them together, and I actually do think you have a net better solution. But I do think it's why I don't feel comfortable, and we've drawn a strong line that it never is just one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing I wanted to touch on was obviously as these tools proliferate, often they're very easy or even cheap or even free to access. You can access them in your browser often or on your phone. How do you think HR professionals should approach the use of generative AI by job applicants or by employees in potentially unsanctioned ways? Like, could that be a problem, and how should they deal with that?
It's interesting. We, as part of our interview process, have a Holmes task, right? Which is, was look at a set of data and give us some analysis back on it, right? Just to kind of get how someone's thinking about it. And I looked at a result, and it was within the first sentence, it sort of was like, our exceptional conversion rates. And I'm like, oh, hi, ChatGPT. Lovely to meet you. So look, it is a risk. The reality is it's no different than when people were doing coding exercises and having something, or, I just think about engineering since something very close to my heart, but like, people can cheat these things, however. But I actually think the people that cheat them, it also exposes potential, maybe some short-sightedness in the process of evaluating talent. Because, a lot of that's trying to figure out how someone's thinking, which yes, there's straight fact-based knowledge things, which are important. But honestly, when someone's in the job, they're always going to be able to have some resources to do the knowledge stuff. It's like, how do they think? How do I patch the problem? And those types of questions, frankly, LLMs are really bad at solving, or solve in a very transparently LLM generative AI sort of way, at least for now. So, I think it's going to force all of us to up our game around in a positive way for everyone, to be like, what are the criteria? What are the signal we're looking for in an interview process? And, also like, I mean, like chances are, early in my career, I like fixed printers while I was in college, right? Like an IT thing. I had a CS major. I was still going to go Google it to like figure out what was wrong. Like, that's not a problem. It's a tool. It's like, what do you use with that data that differentiates talent?
Yeah, that's fascinating. So with everything we've kind of talked about in mind, what's the best way forward? How can we balance enjoying some of the benefits of generative AI while also kind of mitigating the risks?
I mean, I think it's doing a few things. One is really spending a bit more work in investing whether or not, like, what is the limits or the edges of any particular tool, right? Is it just a wrapper for ChatGPT pretending to be something more substantial? Is there real substance under it? And then once you understand the edges, you kind of know how to use a tool, right? Like, you don't use a screwdriver where you need a hammer. Well, in that one case you do, but in general, chainsaw, scalpel. I don't know. Terrible analogies across the board. And then it's around saying, understanding, like, we've now had, 20 years to understand how to use Google in our lives, like how to use web search. We have, so we know when to use it, when to trust it, when to not trust it, and how to sort of integrate it. We've not done that. And so we need to be very thoughtful and introspective and intentional about how we use this new tool. The same way we like, if you click on a link and all of a sudden you're seeing blink tags and like, what looks like a GeoCities website, you're going to be like, maybe I shouldn't trust this one as much as I would if it was like, something.gov, right? So thinking about that through the same lens and, recognizing what it is. It's like graduate research assistant. And it's that incredibly powerful intern. It's that co-pilot that is giving you all of this information so you can make smart decisions faster, but it's not that you trust it blindly. You never stop thinking. You still like, which is, by the way, why, when we hear the concern around, oh, is this going to eliminate every job? No, it's not, because we still value talent. We still value expertise. We still value judgment. What it does is it frees up all of the toil so you can be, doing the things that honestly is where you derive most of your impact.
Thanks so much, Aaron. This has been a really, really fascinating discussion. Now, what's the one thing you want to leave viewers with about how to think about AI and HR in the future?
Thank you, Amit. It's about really saying, how am I going to be using this? Understanding sort of where there's going to be bias and stuff like that, but also at the end of the day, making sure that there's always a human in the middle and that they're the one making the decision.
Brilliant. We're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much to Aaron Goldsmid from Deel. Thank you to you for watching. This has been a Wired Virtual Briefing, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.